The government and Houthi militia announced agreement on prisoners swap. Kuwait relief program continues to support war-stricken Yemen in different sectors. The International Organization of Migration warns that thousands of migrants in Yemen live in dire conditions. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English News with me, Shaza Abdelbey. UN Special Envoy for Yemen Hans Grunberg met with the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Sweden. The two parties discussed UN efforts for de-escalation and renewed political process. They shared impressions on recent meetings in the region and discussed how EU and Sweden can support the UN efforts in Yemen. The Secretary General of the Gulf Cooperation Council affirmed the position of the Gulf Cooperation Council in finding a political solution to the Yemeni crisis and achieving security, stability, and peace in Yemen. This came during a meeting with the Yemeni Foreign Minister Ahmed bin Mubarak on the latest political, military, and economic developments in Yemen, without referring to the ongoing plannings for holding Yemeni consultations in Riyadh next Wednesday. Houthi militia announced an agreement was reached with the government to exchange a number of war prisoners. The deal includes 16 Saudi prisoners and the brother of the Yemeni president. This report has more details.
Iranian-backed rebels in Yemen offered a truce on Saturday, saying the unilateral truce entered into force starting at 6 o'clock on Sunday's evening. The militia affirmed its full readiness to release all detainees, including the brother of President Abdurrabbu Mansour Hadi, in exchange for the release of its fighters. The announcement by the Houthi rebels came a day after they struck several installations in Saudi Arabia, including an Aramco oil storage facility in Jeddah. The coalition responded with airstrikes in Yemen. The group's political head Mahdi Mashhad offered a 3-day truce that would become open-ended if the coalition stopped airstrikes and ended restrictions on Houthi-controlled ports. The Houthi strikes on oil installations in the world's largest oil exporter sent jitters through the oil market, and Saudi Arabia announced that it would not be held responsible for oil shortages if the attacks continued. Fighting in Yemen has led to a stalemate along most fronts, and a humanitarian disaster increased. The truth offer coincided with a meeting called for by the Gulf Cooperation Council. The common meeting in Riyadh will group other Yemeni factions for talks scheduled to start at the end of the month, but the rebels said they would boycott the meetings. Experts said the Houthi new offer could turn into a sustainable truce, as the militia are becoming increasingly isolated and are being affected by the fuel crisis in the country. In this context, Yemeni human rights defenders said the militia seeks behind its initiatives to consume media and draw attention aside from its crimes and violations that affect Yemenis on a daily basis. They pointed out that what makes these probabilities more emphatic is the fact that the militia has thwarted many previous agreements, including the Stockholm Agreement signed with the Yemeni government at the end of 2018.
American Center for Justice called all Yemeni parties to immediately release all prisoners. In addition, the center called on Houthis to be serious in their call for the exchange of prisoners, to show their goodwill and to provide full guarantees for the success of this process, and to release all prisoners without conditions, and to ease their return to their families and relatives. The EU and SIDA have contributed new funding totaling more than $49 million to Yemen. The program will target the most vulnerable community groups, including women, the unemployed, youth marginalized groups, and internally displaced people. Kuwait Relief Program continues its efforts to support Yemenis in different sectors. Such help from Kuwait is not new to Yemenis, as it has always been one of the largest donors to support the country before and now. This report has more details.
With the approach of the fasting month of Ramadan, the Kuwaiti Ministry of Social Affairs and Labor has set some conditions for collecting donations throughout the month, such as prohibiting cash donations and stating the funds must be distributed according to previously established terms. Kuwaiti fund has continued to flow abroad, primarily to the impoverished people in Yemen, as it's entering its 8th year in a war-stricken country, where the assistance focused on the critically damaged health sector. Kuwait Al Zakia House has inaugurated the construction of a clinic in Shabwa Governorate with potentials to provide treatment and medications for 24,000 people. The Kuwaiti Foundation for Humanitarian Aid, named Al Tawasul, has clarified in a statement that Shabwa Governor Abd Rabbu Hashla has laid the cornerstone of the complex, which will house 6 clinics, an emergency ward, a pharmacy, a laboratory, and other related services. Another Kuwaiti charity organization has opened the maternity and infant hospital in Ma'rib Governorate on the 16th of March with $1 million budget. Both projects are part of the continuing humanitarian effort designed by Kuwait on Your Side campaign, which aims to alleviate the suffering of Yemenis who have borne the burden of the 7-year ongoing conflict, as over 80% of Yemenis are facing deterioration in health services due to the ongoing war, which resulted in the death of newborns every 2 hours and the functioning of only 50% of health facilities. The conflict in Yemen made it difficult for more than 80% of the population to access health care services. Additionally, the deterioration of health facilities was a third direct cause of the rising death rates in Yemen. Lacking health services has also resulted in the increase of malnutrition, low immunization rates, and outbreaks of communicable diseases, according to a study published by the International Financial Institution.
2 people were killed and 6 others were injured as a result of armed clashes north of Ib. A local source said the clashes erupted after the Houthi militia tried to loot food aids that was distributed to the people who are facing harsh living conditions. International Organization for Migration reported that the conflict in Ma'rib has displaced nearly 64,000 people since September 2021. IOM added that it has established a new displacement site to provide safe support to newly displaced people. International Organization for Migration said that many African migrants in Yemen need assistance. This report has more details.
Conflict in Africa has pushed people to resume taking the trip of death from the continent across the Gulf of Aden to reach Yemen and eventually the Gulf countries. This illegal activity spiked in late 2021 after a notable dip. The International Organization for Migration has called on the international community to do more to support victims of the war in Yemen, including 190,000 migrants stranded in the war-torn country. IOM has warned migrants from the Horn of Africa are in dire need of assistance. This came in a statement issued by the UN agency in charge of migration issues. Thousands of Ethiopian refugees live on a piece of land in Aden at Khor Maksar area. Many of them were forcibly displaced as the militia has burned their detention center in Sana'a, which restored around 900 migrants. These migrants were detained due to their refusal to contribute in the ongoing conflicts on the fronts of the militia. The refugees in Khor Maksar rely on donations from the residents, and they have offered to wash cars. They complain of the meager donations provided by the International Organization for Migration and United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. Many African migrants, particularly from Ethiopia and Somalia, continue to cross war-torn Yemen on their way to the Gulf, where they hope to find work. 35,000 Ethiopian migrants traveled to Yemen in 2020 before the outbreak of the coronavirus suppressed demand for labor in the Gulf states, according to IOM. Earlier this month, the Red Cross urged donors to avoid shifting their attention away from Yemen, despite other ongoing humanitarian emergencies. In particular, the invasion of Ukraine, which has captured much space in international media for the past month.
Human rights sources reported the death of a young man detained in Houthi prison in Ib. The sources stated that the man died while he was under fear after he was subjected to severe torture leading to his death. Coming next. Despite the ongoing war, the interim capital Aden celebrates World Theater Day. Welcome back. Sana'a Center for Strategic Studies said humanitarian aid in Yemen is not reaching the affected people as it should. The report found that the majority of those who receive aid in Yemen consider it inappropriate to their needs, and many of most vulnerable people were excluded from receiving aid, especially women, people with disabilities, and those from the lower social classes. Over the past 6 years, the UN has received more than $18 billion to fund humanitarian response plans in Yemen. The capital Sana'a and the parts under the control of the Houthi militia are witnessing a daily rise in the prices of goods and services. The prices of most supplies exceeded 30% compared to last month's prices, despite the stability of the supposed price of the Yemeni riyal against foreign currencies in Houthi-controlled areas. Economists attributed the rise in prices to Houthi new taxes, in addition to the oil crisis. Armed men cut off the road in Al Jawf in a protest against the Houthi militia, blockings of hundreds of tankers loaded with oil derivatives. The militants demanded the Houthi militia to allow the entry of oil tankers coming from Ma'rib and Mukalla into Ib without restrictions, so that the prices of derivatives return to their normal value. Houthi militia attacked oil facility in Saudi Arabia on Friday. The attack caused a huge fire that filled the sky of Jeddah with black smoke. This report has more details.
The Houthi rebels' attack on Saudi Arabia's oil facilities on Friday gave another boost to oil prices as markets try to digest a new round of sanctions against Russian oil. The oil market has staged a strong rally in recent months, taking WTI crude oil above $120 per barrel. Oil prices have been driven higher by strong demand following the end of the pandemic recession and the recovery in tight supply due to production bottlenecks. Then there's the Russian-Ukraine war, the United States and the European Union's sanctions against Russian oil, and the growing market expectations of supply interruptions due to the war's lingering. Global demand is going up as we come out of the pandemic and approach the busy summer travel season. Meanwhile, supply is now keeping pace due to a number of reasons, including the Biden administration's restrictions on drilling on federal land in the US. All signals point to significantly more expensive oil and gas globally. The structure of the global oil market is going to change because of Russia, as well as the conversation around fossil fuels and the need for an energy transition strategy that allows for alternatives to be developed before we sacrifice the industry. An oil industry analyst stated that he doesn't see the oil market bull running for too long. Most of the run-up in oil prices is a matter of expectations. Expectations about oil supply disruptions and expectations that the world will stop buying oil from Russia. He also stated that sanctions aren't the same thing as embargoes. The European Union won't go along with America on cutting Russian oil imports. They cannot afford it. How high the oil price will go will depend on energy policy and how it addresses legacy energy sources. With US midterms later this year, pressure will be put on Biden and the Democrats, as the relationship between presidential popularity and the price of gas are well established in political literature.
The Center for Studies and Economic Media in Yemen warned of the consequences of the Russian-Ukrainian war on the prices of wheat and oils in Yemen. It noted that the country imports 30% of its wheat needs from Russia and Ukraine. It also pointed out that wheat prices in Yemen have started to rise to reach 35% since the beginning of the Russian-Ukrainian war, at a time when Yemen has only wheat reserves that may cover only 4 months. World Health Organization continues to support health sector in Yemen to respond to major challenges in the country, especially in the time of war. This report has more details.
Since 2015, Yemen has faced a severe and complex humanitarian crisis due to the largely growing activities of armed groups, inter-community tensions, and economic decline. The Yemen crisis is also linked to additional factors such as food and nutrition insecurity, COVID-19, other disease outbreaks, climate change, and natural disasters. A devastated health system, disruption of water and sanitation networks, and massive numbers of displaced people. It's been 8 years now, and the World Health Organization is still strengthening the health system, responding to vital health needs and saving lives. Today, World Health Organization continues to play a leading role in advising and supporting Yemen health authorities, partners, and community health workers in their efforts to sustain essential and life-saving health facilities and services throughout the country and reaching the most vulnerable populations. World Health Organization is also ensuring life-saving medical and nutrition care for children suffering of severe acute malnutrition with medical complications. Medical supplies and equipment are being delivered to COVID-19 isolation centers and emergency operations centers that coordinate responses to all public health emergencies, with nearly 300 health facilities provisioned with fuel, oxygen, water, and medical supplies and equipment. The health needs of the Yemeni people are expected to become even more urgent and widespread in 2022, unless there is conflict de-escalation, improvement in the economy, and available funding for humanitarian response sectors, including the health sector. Although health assistance to Yemen remains severely underfunded, World Health Organization is prioritizing continuity of services and functionality of operation theaters, ICUs, and COVID-19 testing and treatment centers. World Health Organization also continues working to provide life-saving medical equipment, essential drugs, supplies, and other support and services so that most vital health services remain available for the Yemeni people. World Health Organization continues to call on all parties in Yemen to facilitate humanitarian access and to protect civilians, health workers, patients, and healthcare facilities. Yet, amidst the devastation, the Yemeni people remain determined, resilient, and hopeful.
Since 1962, World Theater Day has been celebrated worldwide. Such celebration is considered as a wake-up call for governments, politicians, and institutions to recognize the important part theater can play in educating and entertaining the people. This report has more details.
Coinciding with the World Theater Day, which takes place on March 27 each year, the interim capital Aden has witnessed the celebration event for this occasion that was organized by the Governorate's Culture Office. In order to revive this international day in an ambience filled with optimism and hope for a bright tomorrow, and a prosperous future.
كلمتي في اليوم العالمي للمسرح أقول إن شاء الله.
In the World Theatre Day, I was the Adani Theatre returns back to what it used to be, to discuss issues that we are living nowadays.
This cultural event was attended by various audiences, in which it has included interested people, participants, and elite theater stars who were awarded for their work in the theatrical framework as a step to revive theater arrangements and return life to the forgotten culture and art, which have disappeared among the war clothes. One of the most prominent activities of this event was the presentation of a comic play entitled بقعة سراب, or Mirage Spot, a play whose presentation, performance, and idea have won the audience's attention.
قدمنا اليوم مسرحية بقعة سراب.
Mirage Spot play is discussing the most two important issues facing the country and the citizen is suffering from, which are prices rise as well as properties looting.
نحن حاولنا نمزج نوعا من الدراما السينمائية.
We tried to present cinematic tragedy in theater performance to deliver the message in a deep, influential way.
Talking about theater in Aden is a talk about creativity and brilliance, especially in light of the youthful spirit and new faces that restore joy in audiences' souls and bring to the fore its theatrical works that carry in their content and ideas the concerns of the homeland and the citizen, which requires supporting and assisting these creations to employ their ideas and bring them into existence.
Here's a reminder of the main headlines. The government and Houthi militia announced agreement on prisoners swap. Kuwait relief program continues to support war-stricken Yemen in different sectors. The International Organization of Migration warns that thousands of migrants in Yemen live in dire conditions. This is the end of the news. Thank you for watching.